The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I have news from Oregon, where the armed Yokul Haram occupation of a federal building has sort of been dying down, but it's also still continuing. A U.S. grand jury has indicted 16 people in connection with that armed occupation at the Wildlife Refuge federal building, led in part by, of course, Ammon Bundy, the son of none other than Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy. The entire thing sort of started to peter out with the death of militant LaVoy Finicum, but it is still going on. We now have charges against 16 people. The specific charges are currently sealed, but there's a prior criminal complaint which charged 11 of the former occupiers with conspiracy to impede federal officers, which, to be honest, sound like some of the more flaccid charges that could have been brought in this situation. They wanted detention. They've gotten the attention, Lewis. We will ultimately, I guess, find out what the actual charges are. I don't know if this is really the attention they wanted, although Ammon Bundy did say, hey, now that this is in the legal system, we can fight this thing. And I still don't even know what this thing is, but they can fight this thing through the courts. My sense is that's not going to be too successful.
No. What they're going to be fighting for is their freedom at this point.
Yeah.
So you really have to pick and choose your battles. These militants that are left over will have put up this fight and stayed here, occupied this building, whatever, for so long and achieved absolutely nothing. And then they will likely be doing jail time.
And the entire thing is actually still going on to some extent. As of yesterday, there were 4 armed militants who were still engaged in a standoff with federal law enforcement at this wildlife refuge. What do you expect to happen at this point? I mean, some of them do want to be martyred. LaVoy Finicum, who did die, said he was willing to die. He would rather die than give in or give up or whatever the case may be. Some of these individuals who were arrested now have arraignments scheduled for February 24th, but meanwhile, some are still engaged in a standoff. I mean, the entire thing is a total abortion.
I don't know. I think eventually they will just give up. If they want to die that badly, they will. They'll stay there until someone comes knocking on the door, then they'll start shooting. So it's just so weird to me that they would take up this battle. I mean, in my opinion, this will not even be a footnote.
No.
Eventually. It's a hot topic right now. It's just a joke.
The arguments that they sort of make about how the government is sort of invalid, right? The government doesn't even have the authority to do some of the things that it does. It starts to be reminiscent of this extremist David Wynn Miller that we interviewed, who believed that by sort of restructuring his name with various punctuation marks and colons and apostrophes in the entire thing, he became an adjective or a prepositional phrase, or I don't even know what, and thus was non-taxable by the government, and the government's authority was not valid over him, whatever. This isn't the exact same thing, but it is this sort of wholesale questioning of any government authority whatsoever that to me is somewhat reminiscent of the David Wynn Miller mentality. And if you haven't seen that interview, check it out on our YouTube channel. Isn't there something they share in common?
I think so. I think if you take the type of person that LaVoy Finicum or Ammon Bundy is, no matter where they live, no matter what they're doing, they are not going to like whatever government exists in such a place. I think the only way these guys are going to be happy is if they move to the southernmost tip of Patagonia and live in complete isolation. Maybe even the Arctic or whatever. They're never going to be happy with any type of government. They're always going to have some type of quarrel.
And continuing our follow-up on the Oregon Yokul Haram armed militia, there's really disturbing video of an 18-year-old girl, a singer, who was challenged by CNN. She claims that she was in LaVoy Finicum's SUV, or the same SUV in which LaVoy Finicum was riding, when he was shot and killed by the FBI. Now, Victoria Sharp, her claims have not been independently confirmed by CNN. There's no particular reason to think she's lying about having been in the car with LaVoy Finicum when he was killed, but it has not been independently confirmed. So I think that's really the main point here. She, in what to me is just absolutely disturbing evidence of total and utter indoctrination, she said that she's willing to die For what? I don't know. I mean, for whatever it is LaVoy Finicum's beliefs were, and I guess they're beliefs that the government is tyrannical. Anyway, these beliefs to this particular 18-year-old girl are worth dying for. And I'm going to play the interview from CNN for you. And in this interview, she is shown video of the stop, the police stop, the FBI stop of LaVoy Finicum's vehicle. And she sort of has a very different perspective of what happened in the video. And let's take a listen and see what we can make out of it.
His hands were up the whole time?
Absolutely. I pray that LaVoy's death will show the American people that these people were inhumane to him. LaVoy opened his door and he got out with his hands up and he started walking toward the back of the vehicle and he said, "If you're gonna shoot, then just shoot me. Just shoot me." And all of a sudden we heard 3 shots, like all together, and he went down. And I was like, oh my God. When he got out of the vehicle, he was not showing any signs of aggression. He had his hands in the air and he was walking and he was in snow and he was very vulnerable and they shot him dead.
On at least 2 occasions, Finicum reaches his right hand toward a pocket on the left inside portion of his jacket. He did have a loaded 9mm semi-automatic handgun in that pocket.
So a lot of times witnesses don't see things correctly. The FBI released some video. Have you seen this video yet?
I don't think I have.
Can I show you, have you take a look at this
Sure.
video?
So he had his hand up. Look at his hands. His hands are in the air.
Right. And this is, see him right there? That's him. What the FBI is saying is that he specifically reached for something in his left pocket twice.
I can't say if he was reaching for a weapon or not.
I don't know, it looks pretty clear.
Hey,
I
watch.
mean, watch.
When his arms go down, they're still flailing. They're not reaching. Watch.
So that to you does not look like he's reaching
No.
across his
And then
body
I was
into his
there.
left pocket.
No.
So usually if officers recover a loaded weapon in an area where they see you reach, that's justifiable force. In this case, do you see it as justifiable force?
I don't. I never see him in that video reach for it. I hope that justice is done because he didn't deserve that. His family did not deserve that.
I feel really bad for this girl. I mean, she's 18, okay? We're talking about an 18-year-old here, and she thinks the best use of her life is to potentially die protesting so-called government tyranny with people like Ammon Bundy and LaVoy Finicum. It is very sad to see children radicalized in this way and just potentially months into legal adulthood already extremists to this degree that they truly believe this fight, and again, I don't even know what this fight is for, is a worthwhile fight to be having.
Yeah, I guess I guess we could ask her. I wish we could ask her if she really knows what this is all about.
Yeah.
I mean, can we say she's been brainwashed and indoctrinated? Maybe she's just confused. Maybe she just really liked these guys. I don't really know.
Very, very sad stuff. I mean, really, really disturbing. Hey, you might have noticed that we didn't really talk about those coin flips that allegedly gave victory in the Iowa Democratic caucus to Hillary Clinton. My sense was that a lot of those coin flip stories weren't accurate, and that indeed appears to be the case. A bunch of corporate media outlets have been saying 6 consecutive coin tosses that went in Hillary Clinton's favor could have turned the outcome of the entire caucus to Bernie Sanders had he won those 6 consecutive coin tosses. And then people sort of disagreeing or misunderstanding the math of how coin tosses work. The Des Moines Register explained very clearly that these coin flips assigned county level delegates. They had an extremely small effect on the overall outcome. The confusion was people believed that the coin flips were used to determine state level delegates. Now, I am not defending the use of coin flips in politics. I'm not, that's not what I'm defending here. What I want to make very clear is that when you talk about county level delegates, many county level delegates for each of the precincts that are involved in that Iowa caucus, the overall effect was almost none. There were a handful of Democratic caucus precincts where a delegate was awarded with a coin toss. These were, there are just thousands and thousands of these across the state from 1,681 precincts, not statewide delegate equivalents. But look at some of the reporting that we saw from different media outlets on this issue. Immediately after this happened, you saw reports from, for example, and we have this to show people, NBC News political director Chuck Todd. Basically, we're talking a coin flip may have decided the presidency. That's not true. Fox News correspondent Shannon Bream speculated that 5 coin tosses could have flipped the outcome. Fox's Sean Hannity falsely claimed that the coin tosses assigned state delegates, and Drudge Report saying America on a coin toss, also suggesting that this could have flipped the results in Iowa. That's just not true, Lewis, and I think people need to understand that. I believe that Bernie Sanders is the more progressive candidate. I've been very, very clear about that, but we shouldn't now believe that these 6 coin tosses for county-level delegates were going to swing this thing in any way.
Agreed. I can understand being outraged that coin tosses were part of the process at all.
Sure.
And that's legitimate. That's fine. But I'm not a Hillary fan at all. And I'm not upset at this because I understand the scale we're talking about.
Absolutely.
But still, we should do away with the coin tosses. There has to be a better way.
I don't think we need coin tosses in politics, no doubt about it. Now, lastly, there is confusion about the math. I saw some Hillary supporters posting to Facebook, the odds of 6 heads in a row, it's still 50-50. Every time you flip a coin, the odds are 50-50. And then I saw Bernie Sanders supporters saying, this is incredibly unlikely. The odds that 6 coin flips in a row would go to Hillary Clinton is just incredibly low. Let me explain the math once and for all. It is true that if you flip a coin one time, the odds of it coming up heads are 50-50, assuming it's a sort of fair coin. It's not a weighted coin. We eliminate the incredibly rare possibility that it lands exactly on its side, which could happen conceivably, Lewis, in the physical world. Very, very unlikely. Anytime you flip a coin, it's 50-50. You get heads, you flip it again, you still have a 50-50 chance of that next flip coming up heads. But this is a different situation. The 6 coin flip scenario is different because we're asking about the odds of one specific set of results, 6 consecutive heads results. And the math is 1/2 or 50% to the 6th power because you're doing 6 of these coin flips. 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 6 times. And that does get you to about a 1.5% chance of 6 heads flips in a row. Think about it intuitively with roulette. Roulette has 36 numbers plus 0 and double 0. So there are 38 numbers. The odds that it comes up 23 on your first spin are 1 in 38. Let's say you hit 23. The odds that 23 comes up on the second spin are also 1 in 38. But if what you're saying before you take any spins, what are the odds of 23 coming up 2 times in a row? The odds are 1/38 times 1/38, which is a very, very tiny number. It was surprising to me, Lewis, the number of people who didn't know the math on this basic probability question.
Yeah, I guess so. It's but most people haven't taken statistics classes or whatever you would take to get you to realize the math involved. So whatever.
Yeah, I mean, even still, you would think that, Anyway, I guess we don't really have to say more about it. But that's the math of it, and let's understand the math. Let's also understand these were county-level delegates, not state-level delegates. And let's also understand that we probably shouldn't have coin flips in politics, but let's not say that this would have turned the Iowa caucus over to Bernie Sanders, because every indication is that it would not have done that. I'm on Twitter if you want to comment about this at dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at LewisMotamedy.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Our program is funded directly by you, viewers, and our listeners on the podcast, radio, DirecTV, Dish Network, YouTube, etc. You can sign up for what we call membership at davidpakman.com/membership. Today's new member of the day is Charles Hazelwood. Charles, thanks so much for being a David Pakman Show member. Charles gets access to the members-only content, including the daily bonus show hosted and produced by producer Lewis. I am merely the sidekick on the bonus show, and so many other great member benefits that you can read about at davidpakman.com/membership. I have a film recommendation for you today. Remember that all of my recommendations are available at davidpakman.com/recommendations. This film was actually recommended to me by Lewis. It's called Monk with a Camera, and the subject of this film is Nicholas Vreeland, who's an American who is also a Tibetan Buddhist monk and a photographer. And it talks about Nicholas Vreeland giving up a life of privilege and wealth, being the son of Frederick Vreeland, a diplomat, the grandson of Diana Vreeland, the famous fashion editor. And at the same time that he takes on this sort of, I don't even know that the term is humble, Lewis. I don't even know that the term is meager, a simple life, I guess we could say. He still has a love of photography. And Lewis, I know you really like this documentary. I'll give you an opportunity to comment on it.
Yeah, it's fascinating when people make these drastic life changes. And what's interesting about this is that he was welcomed into that community and very quickly became a very prominent person in that community. Mm-hmm. And as an outsider, that's an unusual thing. And he uses his photography, or has in the past, to help fund what happens in Tibet overseas, and because, well, money isn't always readily available. And it's just a wonderful documentary.
What do you think about, I mean, could you ever see yourself saying, hey, you know what, I think I'm going to become a Tibetan monk, or maybe not specifically that, but something equivalent?
No, no. The monastic way of life is not for me.
Okay. What about it? What's the worst element of it? What would be for you?
Well, I suppose you could be a monk like him living in Boston. You could do that. That's achievable. Okay. But Dave, I want to maybe hit that vaporizer or go out and have a beer and eat what I want and do what I want and use the computer and listen to music and have my nice guitar and have these possessions. It's just not a lifestyle for me. I think I would just be too bored.
Okay.
Simply, to put it simply.
But maybe you would learn to be fulfilled without the beers and the video games and the computer.
Without
maybe
material,
that's the idea.
Without material attachments.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I think right now, no. I don't think I would.
All right. The film is Monk with a Camera. You can check out that and all of my other recommendations at davidpakman.com/recommendations. And by the way, if you use any of the links on that page to stream the movies or buy books or whatever, David Pakman Show gets a little kickback, so check that out. Let's talk about Jeb Bush. Our old buddy Jeb Bush didn't do so well in the Republican caucus in Iowa. He got just 2.8% of the vote. It's really going pretty poorly for Jeb Bush. He's polling about 9% in New Hampshire, where primary voters will vote on Tuesday. So he's been doing speeches in New Hampshire. He was in Manchester yesterday, and he went on this rant about his ability to lead the country, and the reaction from the crowd was total and utter silence. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. Jeb Bush inspiring absolutely nothing in anyone in the room, which is sort of his trademark, that he can speak and speak and speak, and people just feel no emotion whatsoever. And then he asked people to clap for him in what may be the most sadly and pitifully pathetic moment of the 2016 campaign so far. This is my top choice. Let's take a look at the video.
So here's my pledge to you.
Yeah.
I will be a commander-in-chief that will have the back of the military. I won't trash talk. Mm-hmm. I won't be a divider-in-chief or an agitator-in-chief. I won't be out there blowharding, talking a big game without backing it up. I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Yeah. More like, please wake up and then clap. I think I counted 3 people sleeping in the background, and that's just who was on camera.
People do look a little bit bored. And I guess you don't always know when to applaud. He didn't end his sentence with the proper emphasis.
Right. The dynamics of calling for an applause, right, by the way in which you speak, through the way you speak, there's sort of an art to it, right?
Yeah.
And he may have he had the emphasis on the wrong syllable, we could say.
Yes, I think that's part of the problem. That, and he is rather dull. and
Are you feeling bad for him, though?
Do I feel bad for him?
It's really pathetic.
No, I don't feel bad for him. He got himself into this mess.
Yeah.
And he's achieved quite a bit in the political world
Yes,
already.
I guess that's true.
And maybe that's enough. He needs to just call it quits here. He doesn't have a chance, Dave. It's time to call it quits and not have to ask audiences to applaud for you anymore.
Well, tomorrow we'll go into more detail about whether Jeb has a shot in New Hampshire and sort of how that would change the picture, more broadly speaking, in the Republican primary. But it is really not looking good for Jeb Bush at all. Lewis is absolutely right on that. Here is an odd story. We haven't had one like this in a little while. Actually, I don't know that we've ever had one exactly like this before. An 11-year-old Michigan girl burst into tears when testifying in court that her father, 45-year-old Jonathan Powell, beat her with frozen bacon while he simultaneously quoted the Bible as an explanation for why it was okay to beat her. She said in court, he was hitting me with his elbows, his upper arms, and his hands, adding that he pulled bacon from the freezer and began beating her over the head with frozen bacon. Quote, he was hitting me with frozen bacon and he was pushing me back and I fell right over the dishwasher. I broke it. He was just yelling that the dishwasher was broken. She tried to retreat to the bedroom, but the assault continued, saying, quote, I ran over to my room and my sister was asking me what was wrong. I was in my room for a while. I heard him swearing, saying, you bitch, you broke the dishwasher. Powell entered her room and pushed her or pulled her onto the bed, causing her, or pulled her off of the bed, causing her to hit her head on the wall. He then reportedly threw a tantrum, began hitting her with hands and arms, bloodying her nose, and then he said, this is all okay because of the Bible. He said, it's okay to do that. It's from the Bible. If you spare the rod, you spoil the child. Reportedly, he said that to her while this brutal beating was going on. I guess in this case, it's bacon rather than the rod, but what a disturbed individual, Lewis, that while he is allegedly affecting this brutal beating with meat on this 11-year-old, he is saying it's all okay because this is what the Bible wants. This is Jesus-like in some way.
Well, there have been tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of murders justified in the same way. It's okay because the Bible says it's okay.
Hundreds of millions of murders. Well, maybe I think you're being a little hyperbolic. Hundreds of millions.
Am I being hyperbolic?
I think so.
Over the entire course of
human history?
Of human history?
Yeah,
of Christianity, not human history.
Yeah, I don't think hundreds of millions of people have been killed in the name of Christianity.
It's definitely tens of millions.
I really don't know. I'm going to reserve judgment on that number.
Oh, okay. I haven't done the math, but
Right.
the multiple crusades, the Inquisition,
Yeah.
You have all the occupations and okay, all of
Maybe
that.
you're right.
Colonialism and yeah. So I think I am right. But anyway, I wonder if this punishment was happening with the bacon. I wonder if this is some poetic punishment for gluttony, maybe.
Oh yeah. So you think that this could be poetic in some way? Nothing
Maybe.
too poetic about Powell being charged with a count of third-degree child abuse, for which he faces up to 2 years in prison.
Oh,
I'd
2
say-
years, great. That's wonderful.
I know.
2
I was going
years.
to say maybe he would find Jesus in prison, but he seems to think he's already found Jesus, and that led him to beating an 11-year-old with meat.
Yeah, I hope he finds a rusty shank in prison.
Lewis, you always go to that. You always want people to be extra hurt in prison, as if it should be part of the prison violence is a problem. We need to stop prison violence. That shouldn't be part of the.
Well,
of
then
the
let's give
punishment.
appropriate sentences to incredibly dangerous people, Dave.
So you're saying if a guy who beats his 11-year-old daughter with bacon only gets a 2-year sentence, which he would probably only serve a year of, you kind of need additional extrajudicial punishments because it's such a low sentence. But if he were properly sentenced, then you would be okay with no prison beatings and the like.
I would rather have, okay, here are 2 years, and he gets the crap beat out of him every day in prison for those 2 years. Or alternatively, you can put this guy in a room at the Ritz with no room service, of course.
Yeah, or at least mediocre room
for
service.
40 years.
Yeah,
and he can't leave that room. I would put him in the Ritz, Dave.
Really?
Yeah.
Pay-per-view? No pay-per-view?
No TV.
A minibar?
No, just a very comfortable room,
All right.
prison room.
What do you think about Lewis's overarching hypothesis, paradigm on prison punishment, where he believes that because sentences are often too light for certain types of crimes, we should be sort of welcoming beatings or injuries?
I never said we should be welcoming it.
Well,
I
you're
just
hoping
said
for
I
it.
just said I hope that's what happens.
Okay, but if it happened, you would not welcome it, though. You just want it to happen, but you wouldn't welcome it with open arms.
I'm not saying we as a society should welcome it. I'm
You
just
as an
saying
individual
I
welcome-
personally am totally fine with whatever happens to this guy in prison.
If anybody can make heads or tails out of this paradigm that Lewis is presenting to us, please discuss it with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/David Pakman Show, or on Reddit at davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Chris Shelton, who's a former high-level Scientologist. He was a Scientologist for 27 years. He's the author of the recent book, Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. Love the title of the book. So tell me, how did you get into Scientology? I mean, was it through your parents? Were you a second-generation Scientologist?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I am a second generation. My parents got involved when I was about 4 years old.
And what was the earliest memory, or what are your earliest memories of Scientology?
My earliest memories actually are hanging out at the Pasadena organization back in the 70s, growing up, and doing some classes, doing some children's type classes, communication courses, and things like that. It didn't make any sense to me. It was pretty confusing stuff at the time.
So I was going to say, like, what are children taught? Like, at what types of things are taught to kids who are in Scientology?
Well, you're raised with the lingo, of course, and some of the basic concepts of it in terms of, you're a spirit and that sort of thing. But classes-wise, they have children's communications course, and they have children's study courses and things like that.
And when you, well, I guess for people who aren't already sort of initiated into this, talk a little bit about the levels of Scientology, and then talk to us a little bit about what level you got to and sort of what that means.
Sure. Scientology promises a sort of personal spiritual immortality and personal freedom, is how they call it, right? A sort of a godhood, or apotheosis sort of thing. And they have this divided into levels of services that you do as you climb this bridge to total freedom, they call it. And you're sort of crossing from this horrible existence on earth to this wonderful spiritual immortality sort of thing. And along the way are all these different levels through the counseling they offer. The first milestone being what's called the state of clear. And this was something described in Dianetics. This is old, back to 1950, before, predates Scientology, which is, sort of a full release from all psychoses and neuroses and things in your mind that are affecting you from past traumatic experiences and whatnot. And I have to just say up front, it'd be wonderful if these things really existed, but they don't. So, but this is how they describe it. So first you have clear, and then above that are these higher levels of spiritual awareness and ability, which are called operating thetan levels, or OT levels. Thetan being the Scientology word for a spiritual being. They don't call it a soul or a spirit, they call it a thetan. So you have these levels that you go through. And that's where the Xenu story, for example, comes in, is at OT level 3. And there are 8 released OT levels in Scientology.
And to what level were you able to ascend?
I got to the state of clear, but like many, many, many Scientologists, that was achieved and then taken away, because there was, about 3 or 4 times now they've done these reviews where they say, oh yeah, no, you didn't really make it, And so now you're required to pay more money because we, didn't actually get it done properly, and you're going to pay to redo services you've already done because you didn't really achieve it. So I got clear.
Ballpark for me, if you can. What is the cost average, right, to get to the clear level? What do people more or less pay by the time they've gotten to that point?
Generally speaking, $125,000.
Okay, and that might be over a period of how many years?
Oh, that could be as fast as you want it to go, but at least a year. I mean, at least that. But generally speaking, people take years to get to the state of clear because it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. And especially over the last 20 years or so, they've really been milking people. So it could be upwards of $200,000. And that's between, donations as well as the counseling you're paying for. They make you buy Hubbard's lectures and listen to them and his books, and you have to read them. And there's a lot of costs involved in Scientology that are sort of hidden costs that you don't know about until you become part of the system. They hit you up for money all the time.
In your heart of hearts, when you were really in this, right, did you literally believe all of the teachings of Scientology? I mean, L. Ron Hubbard, I've read about him talking about his trips to Venus and Mars, I believe. And, we know about the I forget even the age of the universe under the teachings of Scientology, but it's just an outrageous number. Did you truly believe that, or did you always have some sort of doubts about those stories?
No, I was a true believer for many years. It was very easy for me to be a science denier because you believe L. Ron Hubbard. You believe what he says. And he, castigates science and physics and everything, really, that disagrees with him. And he claims to be the only one who have discovered these truths about life. And, you go, okay, well, there's a certain degree of plausibility that somebody could discover something that nobody else knows and then share his work. So you go, okay, you give a little bit, and you give a little bit, and you give a little bit. And then really what happens is before you really have thought the whole thing through after, months and years of this, you're accepting things as true that are absolutely ludicrous that on day one you never would have accepted. But as you've progressed through this belief system and accepted Hubbard's authority on things, you find yourself believing things like, the universe being, trillions and upon trillions of years old, right. and he could travel spiritually to Venus and Mars and things like that.
There are so many allegations of assault and abuse and violence in the Sea Org, where you ultimately within which you worked ultimately. Were you ever assaulted?
Yes, I was.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was not assaulted. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was not assaulted by David Miscavige personally. It was one of his juniors who did it. And there's a lot of physical abuse, not just physical assault, like directly somebody hitting you, but there's, much overwork, sleep deprivation. The Sea Organization is Scientology's clergy. It's the core group of Scientology that are working 24/7, and it's a paramilitary group. So there's ranks and ratings, and people are saying sir and saluting and all that. And there was a period of a week one time where we were working on a particular project where I got about 3 hours sleep over a 5-day period. It's an intensely dedicated group, but they take it way too far in how hard they're worked for the cause. And there's a lot of burnout, a lot of people, just crash and burn and end up leaving. And at one point, I was in a high intensity situation where somebody, the senior person to me, got very, very, very upset with me over something I didn't even do wrong. That was what was really so unjust about the whole thing. And she ended up, beating me in front of a room full of people to make her point that she was very upset with me. She shook me, grabbed me, and beat me.
And is it sort of understood that you can't retaliate in a situation like that?
Oh, very much so. Had I done anything other than accept it, I would have instantly been sent to Scientology's Rehabilitation Project Force, or the RPF. And ironically, I ended up there anyway years later. But that would definitely have been the consequences of me retaliating or speaking back or even complaining later to somebody else, even after things had chilled out. If I had gone and said this was wrong and shouldn't have happened and all that, she was in such a position that it would have been unquestionable. It would be unthinkable to have said anything against her.
You recruited more than 10 people. The exact number offhand, I don't remember, but I think it was somewhere between 10 and 12 people to the Sea Org. Question one,
yes.
Are any of those people still part of the Sea Org? And two, do you feel guilty for having recruited those individuals?
I don't know for sure. I know some of them left before I did. I don't know if all of them are still in or not. And guilty? Yeah, I guess I do. I certainly am not happy about it. I wish I of course at the time was not doing it out of malice or because I thought I was part of a con job. I honestly believe that what we were doing was truly making a difference and was truly going to save the world. Those are the words I would have used. And in fact, those are the words I did use to recruit people. So I was a fervent believer at that point. But I'm looking back on it. Yeah, I'm regretful about it. I wish I hadn't done that.
I'm going to remind everybody, Chris Shelton's book is Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. Let's take a break on our TV and radio show. We're going to continue a little bit longer with Chris Shelton and talk about SP, suppressive persons. The full interview will be on our YouTube channel.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Earlier this week, we had Morality with Motomedy. The question was, how do you decide who gets limited medical resources and medical treatment? Lewis sort of generally came up with the idea that you have to look at who has the most potential for life at that time if treated. This would be considering age. This would be considering pre-existing or terminal conditions that individuals may have. We've now given it 48 hours to get feedback from our audience. And there were some really interesting suggestions, Lewis, about how we could ethically decide who to treat, who to provide healthcare to in a situation where the demand exceeds the supply. One person emailed me and said, hey, David, insurance companies have already figured this entire thing out. The 1% wins. There's no need to worry about it at all. Yeah, that's true. And we sort of discussed that, right? What about the people with more money? And we said, hey, that's kind of already the system. So we want to talk about what would be a more moral or ethical way.
Right. We said, I guess our setting was kind of this post-apocalyptic setting, or you're in some situation like that. So yes, let's throw out whatever our governments have instituted.
Another idea someone sent in is, what about considering what the person is expected to add to society? People with higher skilled jobs are given priority. Interesting, very complex, right? I mean, we've determined that, for example, a lot of people who work in finance on Wall Street, that their activity adds very, very little by way of an economic multiplier to society. Their expected earnings are quite high. So should we be thinking about their expected earnings as a measure of what they add to society? Or should we be passing some sort of moral judgment over the type of work that they do? Interesting idea, but also pretty complicated to actually put into action. And then someone else wrote in saying, hey, you treat the most critical people that you think you could reasonably save first. So we discussed, Lewis, if you just treat the most injured people, you're likely going to be treating people that ultimately aren't going to be saved, and maybe less injured people become more critical during that time.
Yeah,
so someone wrote in saying you find the most critical people that you think you can probably save and you go to them.
We kind of touched on that. Yeah, I think I said that if someone is injured very badly, but if they can clearly be saved. Yeah, I guess of course then depending on their general ailments, age, and what they can add, all of that stuff. It's complicated.
Another person wrote in saying first come, first serve. Not really a valid idea in our scenario, because the idea was, there's a bunch of hurt people and the medical resources show up, or if you're in a hospital, everyone sort of shows up at the same time. So first come, first served. That doesn't really apply to our circumstances. Someone else said you treat women first because the future of population depends on women. So you need to prioritize saving women, keeping women alive.
Okay, well, last I knew, human women could not reproduce asexually. So I don't understand that.
Yeah, I get that, Lewis. But a woman can only have, birth one child or twins, whatever. She can only be pregnant once at a time, whereas one man can impregnate numerous women simultaneously, right? So I think that would be the argument. You can, if this is so bad that the population is going to be reduced, by saving women, you support the ability of the population to recover more quickly.
There is some truth to that. I guess it would depend on your specific situation, if it is, in fact, some post-apocalyptic setting.
And the last idea that came in that was interesting is if your country is at war at the time of this, you treat the military-aged males first because those are who are going to win, potentially, whatever war you're fighting at that time. So really interesting, Lewis. So far, both 2016 Morality with Motamides have brought in a lot of interesting ideas from the audience, and we will have another instance of Morality with Motamedi in about a week and a half. I want to tell you a story about the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, which is 60 miles south of Montreal, near the US-Canada border. It's this hugely productive and pristine wetland ecosystem, but things aren't quite right there. Even in this pristine refuge, there are problems. Scientists have been studying fish in 19 different wildlife refuges in the Northeast, and they found that 60 to 100% of the male smallmouth bass that they examined have female egg cells growing in their testicles. This is insane, Lewis. I mean, it is reminiscent of that three-eyed fish from The Simpsons that is mutating because of the outflows from the nuclear power plant owned by Mr. Burns. This is a condition called intersex, and some people are confused by this because the sex of fish is an interesting thing. There are hermaphrodite fish, and that's sort of the normal state of particular types of fish. But scientists are making very, very clear that when it comes to the smallmouth bass, intersex is not a normal situation, that there is no reason that they can understand why male fish should have egg cells growing in their testicles. And the usual suspects are sort of being thought about: contaminants, pharmaceuticals that are being that are getting into the water supply one way or another, various chemicals used in productions for different industrial manufacturing processes, etc. And it also tells us that there aren't even really untouched areas, even an area that is part of a wildlife refuge, because the world is interconnected. Even there, we are seeing the harmful effects of human activity on Earth.
Have they excluded the possibility that this is some natural mutation of some sort?
I guess it hasn't been formally excluded or included, but all of the best analyses from scientists are that there is something here related to human activity that is causing this.
Well, it's a little bit scary. I guess I would not want to be eating one of those fish. Makes you think about if right, like you said, if it's happening there, think about the fish in most of the rivers around here, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, how bad would that be?
And this doesn't apply just to fish. I mean, this is a specific report about smallmouth bass in this particular wildlife refuge, but we've seen these intersex conditions caused by hormone disruption in all sorts of aquatic animals: alligators, turtles, frogs, just animals that are less commonly eaten in the West for sure. Although alligator, I guess in Louisiana, alligator is kind of popular, right, Lewis?
I don't know how popular. People eat it. I've had it. I'm not a big fan, but
frog legs, turtle soup.
Yep, all that stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, not really my thing, but yeah, to each their own, as we like to say. Do you think about this when you eat fish now? Because the sort of pescatarian diet and the more Mediterranean diet, which has less poultry and less red meat, and sort of supplementing that with some fish, but also just vegetarian items. Do you have a concern that as if you go towards a diet with more fish, that between mercury, intersex fish, et cetera, the pollution of our waterways, do you have health concerns over that?
I do. I've cut down on the amount of seafood I eat, actually, and it's I do think about it. It's a shame that we now have to worry about that the same way we worry about meat coming from slaughterhouses and these nasty farms and all of that.
Yeah.
But I think we do have to worry.
No question about that. Absolutely a concern. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I would love it if you called in any time of day. We've been getting a lot of voicemail messages lately, and I want to play one for you today.
Hey, David. Hey, Lewis. It's Grady from Texas. I just want to say I've been binge watching the show. I'm so behind, but I'm like binge watching, trying to catch up. But I haven't been commenting or like calling in about football or anything. But I just wanted to say y'all had a good season. You know, I know you lost against the Broncos, but you know, y'all, that game, Brady couldn't get into a groove. I don't know. They just had an off game. Like, it was just off. But
All right,
I just
let's
want to
stop it there,
congratulate
Lewis.
y'all.
I don't know what Grady's talking about. The Patriots lost? I mean, I just don't know. I didn't hear about anything like that. I mean, I don't know.
Very funny. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Dave's trying to hold a straight face. Yeah, I agree. Brady couldn't get into a groove. So it's a shame when your off game is a postseason game because that's your last game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, did you hear anything about Tom Brady retiring? Someone said to me they thought Tom Brady had played his last game.
I really doubt after the year he just had that he's going to retire.
Okay, fair enough. On today's bonus show, San Francisco is hiding the homeless in advance of Super Bowl 50. We will talk about the Super Bowl I videotape situation. Fascinating story, even if you don't care about sports. And Cuba Gooding Jr. has an interesting hypothesis about O.J. Simpson. We will discuss all of those stories and more on today's bonus show. You know there is only one way to get access to the bonus show. That is as a David Pakman Show member. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership and get instant access to all of the great member benefits. Speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.